Hi, welcome to the Supporting Literacy at Home e-course. I'm so happy that you're here and you decided to take this course. I'm so excited about the content that I've prepared for you, and I think it's just going to be really great and help you so much at home to give you a foundation to support your child just wherever they are in their literacy development, whether they're 2 or whether they're 6. A little bit about myself. I'm Margaret Beagle. I hold a bachelor's in child and family studies, a Montessori 3 to 6 credential, and a master's in Montessori education. I'm also a mom to 3. I have 3 children, including 1 child with dyslexia. I'm just so excited that you're here. So here are the things that I want you to leave this course with. I'll go over kind of that and then how the course is set up, and then this is just going to be the first we're going to dive right into the first section of content. So I want you to leave this course with an understanding of like Montessori, the Montessori philosophy in general, like the Montessori philosophy as an aid to life and kind of what that means, and some basic principles of development that guide Montessori practices. I want you to leave with an understanding of literacy development from like children and their oral language to children who are learning how to read. And I also want you to leave with some cool stuff for your house. So I have 4 like kind of assignments for every section that are just really practical things that you can just stop this video and get started on to implement in your home right away to support your child in their literacy development. So there's a little bit about me, there's a little bit about how the course is going to go. So the content is, when you downloaded the course, you got the full PDF. So that's all the content. So each, I broke this course down into 4 sections. So we've got the introduction section, which is this section, which is going to be about just kind of a general overview of Montessori, some things, some principles of development that I think are really important that guide Montessori practices, an overview of the Montessori language curriculum, and then so that'll be the first section. The next section, so you have the PDF with like that intro to the section, this video content, and then 2 PDFs to go, 2 or 3, a couple PDFs to go along with each section. So this is the first section. The second section is going to be all about oral language, then a section on writing, then a section on reading. So we're just going to dive right in to just some kind of overview of Montessori. So Montessori education, Maria Montessori referred to the Montessori philosophy as an aid to life. So she said all education, especially in the early years, should be an aid to life and an aid in the natural development that's happening. So I heard a Montessori trainer once say that the Montessori philosophy has been hijacked by the idea of school. So we have this beautiful Montessori philosophy that follows development. It's based in how children grow and learn. And we've taken this beautiful thing and we've kind of tried to stuff it into this box of school and this idea of school that we know as like kind of traditional education. So Montessori just follows development. When Marie Montessori first started her schools, she was really looked down on because like childcare or caring for children was not a profession that was valued. And I think that that's still kind of true today. So she started these schools, she opened these beautiful environments for these children to come into. And she didn't have academic materials when she started her early children's houses. The children came in and they played, they sang songs, they prepared food, they cleaned up, they took care of the space with each other in community. So she observed these children coming in and doing these things, and that's how her work started, and that's how her work grew from that. Parents of these children who were in her care were like working families in Rome, and they came to her and pleaded with her to teach their children they wanted their children to be literate. So they wanted her to teach their children how to read and write. So she already had this beautiful framework for this work that she was doing with these children every day, and based on observation, she developed some literacy materials to help them read and write. And she found that when they were given developmentally appropriate activities and hands-on materials that these children from these poor working class families that lots of people look down on were able to read and write, just joyfully and kind of spontaneously. So all of Montessori education is just an aid to life. So there are a few things that I want you to know kind of about development that I want you to keep in mind throughout the course, because I'm going to refer back to them. So Montessori broke development down into 4 planes. So there's the first plane of development, which is 0, birth to 6, around 6. And then the next plane, the second plane of development, is 6 to 12. The third plane is 12 to 18. And the fourth plane is 18 to 24. So kind of human development is broken down into those 4 stages. This course is going to focus on that first plane of development, so that time from 0 to 6. So one thing about that first plane of development is something called sensitive periods of early childhood. These sensitive periods can be thought of as windows of opportunity. So they can just be thought of as windows of opportunity where a child has like a natural burst of growth and development. So these sensitive periods, they occur at predictable times in early childhood, and there are 4 of them that we're going to talk about today. If you've done any research on Montessori, or you have some kind of Montessori practices in your home, you might have read about sensitive periods, and there's some disagreement about what the sensitive periods are. So I'm going to focus on 4 because sensitive periods they're universal. And they occur regardless of the time in which a child is living. So these sensitive periods, sometimes you might see like a sensitive period for reading, and there's no sensitive period for reading because that's not universal. Not all people learn how to read, and not all people historically have learned how to read. So these sensitive periods are universal to humans, regardless of where they are on the planet, regardless of what time in history that they've lived. So the 4 sensitive periods that I'm going to focus on today are the sensitive period for order, the sensitive period for language, the sensitive period for sensory perception, and the sensitive period for coordination of movement. So I'm going to go through these kind of briefly. I'm going to be especially brief about the language one because we're just going to cover that a whole lot. So the sensitive period for order, I'm going to start here because I think this one is so important. And when you understand and can recognize, your child is in their sensitive period for order, it can really be a game changer in just a lot of things. So the sensitive period for order occurs, I'm going to pull up so I'm really accurate. So I'm going to pull up my notes to make sure I haven't written down one thing and say the other. So the sensitive period for order occurs from birth to around 4.5. So during this time, children are in that stage of having an absorbent mind. So they're taking in everything around them, and they have to do something with all this information they're taking in. So the sensitive period for order helps them categorize and organize all the things that they're taking in. This is why Montessori environments, order, external order, is very important. We color code things for these children who are in this stage. We make sure we don't do big rearrangements. We make sure routines are very important for children because they are just, they're really categorizing everything they're taking in. So the more external order we can provide for them, it just helps them create that internal organization. So children in the sensitive period for order can seem really stubborn and really rigid and sometimes like a tyrant. So a good example of this is, let's say you just happen to grab a yellow plate and that's what you make lunch on for a couple of days in a row, and your child has in their mind organized lunch, yellow plate, and one day the yellow plate's in the dishwasher, and you grab a purple plate and they lose their mind. Or let's say one parent typically does a certain routine at bedtime. That parent is not available or is out that evening, and the other parent hops on and they lose their mind. No, daddy has to read the story, because in their mind they have organized bed, dad, story, and it's not right. So understanding this can really help us just change the way, it can really help us change the way we're responding to them, right? Instead of responding out of frustration, like, why are they being so rigid? Why aren't they being so flexible? We can understand, like, oh, like they're feeling the same way you would feel if you walked out to your driveway and your car wasn't there one morning. But like, that seems a little extreme, but that's kind of what they're experiencing. Like, something is not right. Like, they have organizing this information and suddenly just something's not right for them. So this doesn't mean that the same parent has to do the bedtime routine every night. This doesn't mean you have to have that yellow plate or that purple cup clean every single day for them to eat lunch. It just means that we give them a heads up when something is going to change, right? And it just helps our response. Oh, I see you're disappointed because you can't have lunch on the yellow plate. Today we're going to have lunch on the purple plate. So it just helps us as adults too to be able to respond to them, not out of frustration. So that's the sensitive period for order. The next one is the sensitive period for sensory perception, and it occurs from birth to around age 4.5 as well. So during this time, children are, again, in that absorbent mind stage. They're organizing all that the information that they're taking in. So they just are really naturally drawn to sensorial experiences. They want to touch things. They want to put things in their mouth. They want to smell things, and like, just they're taking things in with all 5 senses, and all of these sensorial impressions that they're taking in are like sensorial impressions of like more abstract concepts that they'll learn later on. So Montessori, the language curriculum, really supports this sensitive period for sensory perception. We provide, like, every experience that they have in the classroom is hands-on and multi-sensory, to really support that sensitive period for sensory perception. So the third sensitive period we're going to talk about today is the sensitive period for coordination of movement. So just think about all the movement that children master from the time they're born to the time they're 6. It's unbelievable. We don't do that as adults. We don't master that kind of movement as adults. Just from like being an infant, the 6 years is not a lot of time, but think of all the movement that they master from the time that they're born and they're starting to hold their own head up and they're developing core strength until the time that they're 6, when they're still refining their fine motor to write with a pencil. So Montessori supports this by integrating movement into the entire day. There's no need for movement breaks, like the whole day is a movement break. And the language curriculum supports this too, by offering lots of opportunities for movement while learning. So those, and then we're going to talk about the sensitive period for language. So the sensitive period for language occurs from birth to around age 6. Think about how much language, this is like the movement. Think about how much language children master from the time they're born to the time they're 6. Sometimes children have mastered more than one language during this time. Children during their sensitive period for language have an unlimited capacity for vocabulary. They have an unlimited capacity for acquiring language, and no one has to teach children how to speak, right? Like, we don't have to give explicit instruction on children. We don't have to give that explicit instruction to children on learning how to speak. They just absorb it and just have an unlimited capacity for it. So the whole Montessori curriculum really capitalizes on that sensitive period for language. And during this course, hopefully you will understand, you'll learn ways to also, if you have that child under 6, to capitalize on their sensitive period for language. So let's see, that all is in one PDF that you have with the information you downloaded. So the next PDF you have in this section is going to be the PDF on kind of the overview of the Montessori language curriculum. So the Montessori language curriculum can be broken down into 3 sections in the classroom: oral language or spoken language, writing, and reading. And that's it. It's so simple. but just the simplicity really, it can be so simple because it really capitalizes on this development that's already happening. It really capitalizes on it and supports it. So yeah, those are the three branches of the language curriculum, and there's some more. It's a little more in depth in the PDF that you have, but while we're talking about that, Maria Montessori actually only invented 3 language materials. She invented sandpaper letters, the movable alphabet, metal insets, and she also talks a lot about I Spy, or the sound game. But just really 3 materials plus that activity. So the whole Montessori language does not have to be overwhelming. It does not have to be overwhelming. There are so many things. It's such a simple foundation. So I hope you find in this course some really great tips on how to implement some activities and just things into your regular routine at home. Because I know when you do a Google search, it can feel really overwhelming. It can feel really overwhelming, like there's this rush to teach your child how to read, that you need to give your kid like a boost at home to support their reading development and their academic development later. And it can be so simple to implement these things once you have that strong foundation in development and in kind of the Montessori philosophy as a whole, to support that development. So that's what you have this week. And your assignment this week, all this is laid out in that first PDF. All that is laid out in that first PDF under the intro. So this week's assignment is, I want you to create a reading space in your home. Children, often their first experience with literacy is making that connection between reading and literacy and being loved. So I want you to think about all the spaces in your home where you read with your child, whether that's your bed or their bed or on your couch or wherever it is. And I want you to think about creating a space for independent reading. So a place where your child can independently go and enjoy books and explore books, even if they're not reading themselves yet, just some like designated space. So you don't have to go out and buy anything. Think about the space you already have. Think about how your home is set up and your family routines. So this space might be a corner in their bedroom. It might be a spot in like a communal space, like your living room or your family room. It could be some kind of tent, cozy tent situation. It could be really simple. It could be a floor pillow and a basket where you keep a rotation of books available to them. So think about the things that your child needs to be able to enjoy exploring books independently, and think through a space, like a designated space for that. This will really highlight the importance of reading to your child and reading with your child, and exposure to books is so valuable. So creating a designated space just places even more value on that. So yeah, all that's laid out in your PDF, and you've got those other 2 PDFs. So as we go through this course, feel free to like take notes during the videos or just use the PDFs, however you learn best. So yeah, have fun working on that space.